Thank you very much, Charles, and thank you once again for inviting me here to present our cultural trends. It's a particularly exciting year, as you've already seen with our revolutionary style and tone, and that's going to permeate through a number of things I'm going to show you now. Before we go much further, just a little bit about who we are. Essentially, 1HQ are a strategy and brand agency which employs a blend of skill sets that bring together the key elements that can enable more effective brands. And I'll talk a little bit about that in the context of why cultural trends. And so we really specialize in finding the social currency behind all of the trends you see so that you can apply them more effectively. And to do that, we use people like social anthropologists. And in fact, I was chatting to Liz earlier, who's going to talk to you later on about vegans and what's going on behind them in their society and cultural drivers too. So it's a lovely thread throughout the day. So why do we do the cultural trends piece for Charles? Why has he invited us back again and again? And not just look at those food and drink trends in isolation on their own. Well, essentially, it's all about the meaning behind what we're seeing. So we're looking at the ways into why we consume what we do. And so when we buy something, we actually don't really buy the product, we buy the meaning behind the product. And these visual and verbal cues, the atmosphere, the way you experience your restaurant or the food you cook, and how you feel when you buy it, brings forth a lot of the meaning behind that experience. And that's becoming more and more relevant, as I'm sure you know from the big trend in experiential elements that Charles has just talked about. So we use these codes, cues, signs and symbols to help us feel the way we want to feel about the brands and the products. And particularly in FMCG, we find the cultural codes far more important than they used to be. When I started out 20 years ago, when I left my experimental psychology degree, there wasn't so much of the cultural codes in use because they weren't really required. Products differentiated themselves much more by the actual taste and the quality. We're dancing on a pinhead between one brand and the other in terms of the quality experience. So the reason really for this cultural analysis, the why, is to enable us to differentiate, future-proof, create an idea for why you should buy us. And we often find that it's because our clients are spoilt for choice. Which of these trends should we use? Which are relevant? How do you know which ones are fads versus long-term trends? And cultural analysis explains what's going on behind to help you decide whether or not one trend is right for you and how long it will last. The way that we do it, people often ask, how do you do this? Because it's not your classical primary research where I started out, focus group surveys, which is essentially what people say, and that uses a part of their brain called the frontal lobes, or system 2, as it's often called. And that does help us understand why people think they're doing what they're doing. But it doesn't really get below the surface to how they feel about products. Why would you pick a BMW instead of a Mercedes when essentially it's got 4 wheels, you can fit the baby seat in the back, etc. And that's all going on in the subconscious. And in fact, Harvard Business School have now proven that 95% of decision making is usually made in that system 1 subconscious amygdala part of the brain. And so the surveys and the focus groups do still help us understand some of that decision making, but it can be very post-rationalized, as we call it, and not always as helpful as understanding what's going on in terms of the meaning. So we've used something called semiotics to help us understand how to apply platforms to use these subconscious codes. So let's have a little look at some of those. What's great when we work with Charles is because he's the primary information gatherer, the food people, they can give us the extra pieces of information we need to do this, And that's the visual and verbal cues behind it. So it's the language, it's the photography of the places, the experiences, the feelings that are going on in these contexts, rather than just the trends themselves. And from that, we can analyze those signs, codes, and symbols to create these overarching macro trends and drivers. And so this enables you to identify the deeper opportunity areas. And how it can be applied to your brand is essentially you look at the bigger culture. So I'm obviously just going to be able to talk to you about the bigger cultural drivers right now in a room full of so many different brands, products, retailers. But then we can then apply that into your category and see which trends apply to your category, and then inside of that, your brand and meaning, so that you can express yourself in a more meaningful, relevant way. And that means that people think they want to buy you because you're something about what they are trying to buy into in the world and society at the moment. So without further ado, let's have a look at some of these big cultural drivers. These, by the way, are all in your trend books that you're going to take away with you. And you can also see further information online at the hub as well. So first of all, we know that the big macro trends, as Charles has already told us, center around this gravitational pulling effect, the revolutionary code at the heart of it all. It's a bit like different planets circling each other with different gravitational forces pulling on each other, causing their impacts to move accordingly. So trends don't act in isolation, they are affected by each other. Now, underneath all of that are actually 48, which I'm not going to take you through, I'm telling you now, cultural driving forces. And these are like the social, anthropological needs underneath that cause these big stories that you see going on now. I'm going to touch upon a couple of them for you, but again, you can go and find out about them afterwards. They're very interesting. And different ones will be more relevant or less relevant for your brand, your product, your retail space. So they have around them these 4 areas: revolution, which has the nurture us, freedom and fear, and then you have kind to us and flamboyance. So I'm going to just touch upon those mainly now as the bigger stories. So revolution, which Charles talked to you about, this is our most revolutionary central point of our trends wheel. And it was very interesting when we were working on this, that we very quickly came to this theme. But it was so different that we had to do a number of points of validation to check we were entirely happy that this should form our central driver. But essentially, because we're in an increasingly anti-establishment world, and it's not just in the political arena, obviously we've seen a lot of that there, but ordinary people now are able to affect change through the ability of the technology, the social networking, and we can see that happening all around us on a daily basis. And we've got some speakers as well that are going to specialize in that area. But the technology shifts really enable that to happen. And the people are able to speak very quickly. And I'm going to touch upon one particular area that's happened in the last 72 hours that's fascinating and caused a lot of debate in our office yesterday morning. But let's see what is driving this revolution, these 4 circling planets around our sun. So first of all, we'll have a little look at freedom and fear. Now, I was brought up by a father who loved science fiction, and so I've been hearing a lot of these alternative, futuristic stories since I could read. But now we see it all around us, that actually we can have the robots help us live our lives. And this creates a very strange dichotomy in our brains between the benefits that we applaud every day, where we can have the food more conveniently brought to us, personalized, as we've just seen in the video, and robots can make things for us, cook things perfectly for us. And we applaud that, we love it. It makes life faster, more convenient, we don't have to do any menial jobs anymore. But, and it's a very big but, it's a but that in recent studies, 70% of us are quite worried about. the mistrust that comes from these robots taking over. And also in the studies I've been looking at, we actually don't really understand how much the algorithms are driving our lives and the choices that are being made. And this is a period of deep distrust that's going on. And a number of you might have seen on the tubes, in your magazines, in your newspapers, that the social media giants know we're worried. In fact, they know we're really worried, enough that my newspaper for 4 weeks in a row had the big Facebook ad explaining how they look after your data. And then just for the most recent 4 weeks, Google has decided to do exactly the same thing as well. No more, be secure with security checkup. So they know that they're going to have to do something very quickly because we are beginning to mistrust those people that we have adored for perhaps the last 15 or so years, and now it's turning on them. So, what I grew up with as a child, I remember watching all of these different sci-fi films and reading the books behind them. This fear is increasing, and we can see that it's purveying. But we've had this fed into our society and culture, actually, for many years. The science fiction writers, Isaac Asimov, and various writers of iRobot telling us that we need to watch out for this. And of course, the wonderful late Stephen Hawking was never entirely convinced this was safe. So that's our big tension and our fear, and it means we've got to be very careful with how we purvey our stories on this topic area. Conversely, what we also see with our fear and mistrust in our times of an unstable world is this tribalism. And Charles was touching upon this earlier in terms of the foods we've seen. Now, why does tribalism appear in times of distrust? Well, in society, what it does is it helps us to bond. It helps us to feel safe because we get this closer sense of belonging. So spaces that we can create and products that we can create that help us feel like they understand us. Even this British food trend that we saw a moment ago from Charles will be built upon partly by this tribalism, as well as obviously the shorter food miles, environmental benefit. So this is coming through also in the very flamboyant ways in which they are displayed. So again, social anthropologists talk to you about various dances and dresses and costumes, but any kind of flamboyance that portrays certain types of belonging and culture in society that is attention-grabbing helps to build in this element of flamboyance. And we've got some cultural codes that are hidden in the 48 about surprise food. So again, intriguing people, having striking elements that really surprise them and violate your expectations, enable you to feel that you're gaining this greater flamboyant experience. Also, polarized foods that are very extreme, either in one direction, such as extreme indulgence, or the other direction where you're extremely healthy or worthy in some way, again, play to those tribal codes. And we can see this happening more and more, again, in some of the advertising stories. So here's just a couple of the examples of the food dreams come true, and this idea that you've got the ultimate experience, that you can blend these different elements to create a sort of hybrid, extreme moment. They're going to continue. We've seen this for a while, particularly with our Insta culture, as Charles was talking about, where we need to explain to everybody that we're having a great time, just in case you didn't know. Now, nurture us, as we saw in the wheel, has a big influence this year. It's been around for some time in different guises, but it continues to be big and powerful. And that blue planet effect that Charles just mentioned is so big. I can't go and listen to a focus group now without somebody mentioning the plastic problem, that they saw the seahorse or the bird trapped. It's everywhere now. And it has a bigger, deeper meaning in people's feelings with society. The revolutionaries are looking for us to look after the planet properly, but also the people on the planet properly. It's a collective responsibility, and now that the popular media is talking about it every day, I would say that easily just 5 years ago, nobody would spontaneously talk to me about that when I was conducting any type of research. Now I don't even have to probe it. It comes up every time. Also, there is a little bit of an egocentric reason for this being very powerful. We actually do get that dopamine hit and that sense of self-esteem if we know that it's important to do the right thing, again, out of the mouths of consumers, that's the sort of language we're hearing, then they feel better about themselves as well. So it is a bit of a double hit. And there's lots of lovely data that proves this. Nielsen, Kantar, 70-odd% of people will pay more for brands that are seen to put across their nurturing credentials in some way. And Unilever talks about how their sustainable living brands are growing 50% faster than the ones that are not their sustainable living brands. And we now see that there's some more bold communications happening. A number of you will have seen on the tube as you came up here the Oatly ad, which is very disruptive. It's like milk, but made for humans. Now, that's a pretty bold and brave statement, but again, it's part of this tribalism. Which group are you in? Are you with us or are you against us? And it's really calling out the fact that cow milk's made for cows, not humans, and that's quite a tough statement to make. And of course, the thing that's caused the huge debate in our office yesterday, I'm going to run now and see what you guys think of this ad. But Nick, if you wouldn't mind running the advert that was put on YouTube on Friday, here's another disruptive ad for you.
There's orangutan in my bedroom, and I don't know what to do. She plays with all my teddies and keeps borrowing my shoe. She destroys all of my houseplants, and she keeps on shouting, ooh. She throws away my chocolate, and she howls at my shampoo. There's a orangutan in my bedroom, and I don't want her to stay. So I told the naughty orangutan that she had to go away. Orangutan in my bedroom, just before you go, why were you in my bedroom? I really want to know. There's a human in my forest, and I don't know what to do. He destroyed all of our trees for your food and your shampoo. There's a human in my forest, and I don't know what to do. He took away my mother, and I'm scared he'll take me too. There are humans in my forest, and I don't know what to do. They're burning it for palm oil. So I thought I'd stay with you. Orangutan in my bedroom, now I do know what to do. I'll fight to save your home, and I'll stop you feeling blue. I'll share your story far and wide so others can fight too. Orangutan in my bedroom, I swear it on the stars. The future's not yet written, but I'll make sure it is ours.
So, PR media stunt, clear cast, did they really ban it? Well, very interesting. I've been watching a lot of the social media since Friday, and I also watched, I don't know if anyone else saw the clip, This Morning talk about it yesterday. They briefly mentioned that Clearcast don't actually ban things, and it was about the Greenpeace Association who originally made the film. They talked very briefly about, was it a PR stunt? And then pretty much the rest of the whole of the 6-minute segment talked about stopping clear-cutting primary rainforests, the habitat loss, the pollution that rainforests suck up for us because we contaminate so much, the fact that 50% of what we buy in the supermarkets has got palm oil on it. In the background, they were running cute pictures of the orangutans at Chester Zoo. Pretty much everything I've looked at online, including the fact that 500,000 people have signed up to the campaign to unban that very video, and the fact that 44,000 people have already reviewed the This Morning programme, suggests that actually they don't really care about whether it was a PR stunt or not, and whether or not Clearcast really banned it. What they do care about is people making a revolutionary stand to make the change that all of these nurture us codes are about. The blue planet effect, the plant power elements. And that's really what we're seeing now in the world of whether or not the social media is really true or not. It's about whether or not it's following something that they believe in, fits with their tribal culture, and is something that they think should be fixed and that they're passionate about. And this is what we're seeing more and more as society shifts and changes. And of course, we have the technology to empower ourselves to do something about it, and can launch a campaign straight away that gets 500,000 signatures on a petition straight afterwards. We also see this happening in nurturing us, so it is about the planet, but also us as well. We have the Virgin Food Code that we see out of our 48, where we're looking for other untouched elements that Charles was talking about that can nurture us as people so that we know they haven't been contaminated in some way. And here's just a couple of examples. Our last code in the central macro cultural codes is about being kind to me. And before, many years ago, I can remember drawing a triangle of needs where you had to choose between quality, health, and taste. And I remember doing that. I think it was about 15 years ago, and that was my sort of core needs triangle. Now, because of all this amazing technology, we're able to actually eat without compromise and have amazing, delicious foods that we know will be kind to our bodies and help us have our cake and eat it. I'm not quite sure if that amazing cronut would quite fit into here, but it was gorgeous. But here, as we've seen the tech that Charles was just showing us earlier, there's other examples of tech, and also these alternatives where we can see people like James Carwell actually making for us plant-based alternatives to the usual ones that we would use in food, so we can feel better about what we're eating at the same as really enjoying it. So these really are just a very quick snapshot of what it is that you can find out and discover about why all these amazing trends that the food people find are happening, what's going on behind them. And here you can see where the 48 fit of our drivers. So how do you go ahead and do anything with these? How can you apply them in your life, in your real world, where you don't get to carefully make products out of plant-based sushi, spending 5 hours on one dish? So what you need to do is essentially identify which of those macro-cultural drivers are relevant to your brand. And from that, you can develop your opportunity platforms and understand which ones can drive and fit that brand positioning, brand essence, brand tree, brand house, whatever it is. And from that, your activation platform can then fit truly to these bigger stories that are going on out there. And then when consumers see your product, your brand, they'll feel more attached and associated to it and want to join that particular part of their tribal culture. So that's it from me. Thank you very much, Charles.